Ladies and gentlemen, every time you open your mouth without purpose, you give away something valuable. Not money, not time alone, but power. Power is not in constant expression. Power is in controlled expression. Many people believe that influence comes from speaking more, explaining more, proving more. But the truth is the opposite. The more you talk, the less weight your words carry. When everything is said, nothing is respected. You must understand this principle. Silence is not emptiness. It is containment. It is the ability to hold your thoughts, your plans, your emotions until the right moment. Because when you speak too much, you reveal your strategy before execution. You dilute the impact of your ideas. You invite unnecessary opinions. You lose the mystery that commands respect. And slowly, without realizing it, you become common. But powerful people are not common. They are intentional. They don't speak to fill space. They speak to shift outcomes. There is a discipline required here, the discipline of restraint. You must train yourself to ask, is this necessary? Is this adding value? Is this the right moment? If the answer is no, then silence is the superior choice, because every unnecessary word is a withdrawal from your authority. Understand this. Your mouth can either build your future or betray it. Many people talk about their goals endlessly, but never execute. They feel productive because they are expressive, but expression is not progress. Talking about a plan is not the same as building it. In fact, excessive talking often replaces action. It gives a false sense of accomplishment. That is why some people speak loudly, achieve very little, while others move quietly and produce extraordinary results. You must become the second person, the one who thinks deeply, speaks, selectively acts decisively, because real power is not loud. It is focused, it is controlled, it is intentional. When you reduce unnecessary talking, something powerful happens. Your words gain weight, your presence becomes stronger. People listen more carefully, your actions become your voice, and suddenly you don't need to convince anyone. Your results will speak for you. Silence preserves power because it forces you to become deliberate with your energy, your thoughts, and your presence. Most people underestimate how much strength is lost through unnecessary speech. Every word you release carries a piece of your focus, and when you speak without intention, you scatter that focus in all directions. Power, by its nature, requires concentration. It requires containment. When you are constantly explaining, reacting, or filling space with words, you are leaking that concentration, and with it, your influence. Silence, on the other hand, gathers your energy. It creates a sense of control, not only over your environment, but over yourself. When you choose not to speak immediately, you are no longer driven by impulse. You are operating from awareness. That awareness allows you to observe more, understand more, and respond with precision instead of emotion. And precision is where power lives. There is also a psychological dimension to silence that most people ignore. When you speak less, people pay more attention to what you do say. Your words begin to carry weight because they are not frequent or careless. Scarcity increases value. If you say everything, nothing stands out. But when you are selective, each word becomes significant. People lean in, they listen carefully, and they assign importance to your voice because you have trained them to expect meaning, not noise. Silence also protects your intentions. Many people lose power not because they lack ability, but because they expose their plans too early. When you talk excessively about what you are going to do, you invite opinions, doubts, and distractions that weaken your execution. Silence allows ideas to develop without interference. It gives you the space to refine your vision privately before presenting it publicly. By the time others see it, it is no longer fragile, it is established. There is strength in being misunderstood temporarily if it means maintaining control over your direction. Not every thought needs validation, and not every plan needs an audience. When you constantly seek to explain yourself, you position others as judges of your path. Silence removes that dynamic. It keeps authority where it belongs, with you. Another aspect of silence is emotional discipline. Talking too much is often a reaction, an attempt to justify, defend, or prove something. But power does not need constant defense. When you are grounded, you do not feel compelled to respond to every comment or engage in every conversation. You choose your moments carefully. That restraint signals confidence. It shows that you are not easily shaken or controlled by external stimuli. Silence also enhances your perception. When you are not focused on speaking, you begin to notice what others miss. You pick up on tone, behavior, and intention. You understand people more clearly because you are not competing to be heard. You are observing to understand. That awareness gives you an advantage in any environment because you can respond strategically instead of blindly. Silence preserves power because it aligns your actions with purpose. It removes unnecessary noise and forces you to operate with intention. Instead of using words to create the illusion of progress, you use discipline to produce real results. And when your actions begin to speak, your words no longer need to. Words are currency, and like any currency, their value is determined by how wisely they are used. When you speak, you are spending. Every sentence is a transaction. Every explanation is an investment or a loss. The problem is most people spend their words carelessly, without strategy, without awareness, and without understanding that overuse leads to devaluation. If a person hands out money to everyone, at all times, without purpose, that money loses meaning. In the same way, when you talk excessively, your words lose impact. They become common, predictable, easy to ignore. But when you treat your words like a limited resource, something begins to change. People start to pay attention because they recognize that when you speak, it matters. Currency is not powerful because it exists. It is powerful because it is controlled. The same is true for words. Power does not come from saying more. It comes from saying what is necessary at the right time with precision. When you master that discipline, your voice carries weight far beyond its volume. Every conversation becomes a marketplace. You are either adding value or creating noise. If your words do not bring clarity, direction, or insight, they are not assets. They are liabilities. And liabilities drain your influence over time. People begin to tune you out, not because they disrespect you, but because you have trained them to expect excess instead of substance. Words should be invested, not wasted. An investor does not throw money into every opportunity. They analyze, they wait, they choose carefully. In the same way, you must develop the ability to hold your words until they can produce the greatest return. That return may be respect, understanding, or influence. But it only comes when your speech is intentional. There is also a compounding effect. When you consistently speak with purpose, your credibility grows. People begin to trust that when you say something, it is worth hearing. That trust becomes influence, and that influence becomes authority. But the reverse is also true. Careless speech compounds into doubt. Over time, even your important words lose their power because they are surrounded by too many unnecessary ones. Another dimension of this principle is emotional spending. Many people use words impulsively to react, to defend, to prove. But emotional spending is often reckless. It leads to regret, misunderstanding, and weakened positioning. When you allow emotions to control your speech, you are spending without calculation. Power requires restraint. It requires the ability to pause, to think, and to respond instead of react. Silence in this context becomes savings. It is what allows you to accumulate strength. The more you control your speech, the more value your words hold when you finally release them. And when you do speak, it is not noise. It is direction. It is not reaction. It is intention. Understanding that words are currency changes how you communicate. You stop trying to fill space. You stop explaining unnecessarily. You stop seeking validation through constant expression. Instead, you begin to operate with clarity and control. You recognize that not every moment requires your voice, and not every thought deserves to be spoken. And once you reach that level of awareness, something shifts. You are no longer just talking. You are transacting. You are no longer just expressing, are influencing. Clarity reduces unnecessary communication because it eliminates confusion at the source. Most excessive talking is not driven by importance, but by a lack of precision. When people are unclear in their thinking, they compensate by using more words, repeating, explaining, rephrasing, and still failing to be understood. The issue is not communication itself. It is the absence of clarity behind it. When your thoughts are clear, your words naturally become fewer and sharper. You don't need long explanations because you already understand exactly what needs to be said. Clarity organizes your mind. It filters out the irrelevant and highlights the essential. As a result, what comes out of your mouth is direct, focused, and effective. Unnecessary communication often comes from uncertainty. When you are unsure, you tend to over-explain in an attempt to cover gaps in your understanding. You speak more, hoping that somewhere within your words, meaning will emerge. But this only creates more noise. It burdens the listener and weakens your message. Clarity removes that burden. It allows you to say the right thing once instead of many things repeatedly. There is also a discipline in clarity. It requires you to think before you speak, to process internally before expressing externally. This internal processing is what reduces the need for excessive conversation. Instead of figuring things out while talking, you figure them out in silence first. Then when you speak, you deliver a refined thought, not a raw stream of ideas. Clarity also respects time, both yours and others. When you communicate with precision, you reduce back and forth, misunderstandings, and corrections. You don't need follow-up explanations because your initial message was strong enough to stand on its own. This efficiency is a form of power. It shows that you are not only aware of what you're saying, but also of how it impacts others. Another dimension is confidence. Clear people do not feel the need to convince excessively. They state their point and allow it to stand. Over-communication often signals doubt, an attempt to force agreement or validation. But when you are clear, you are grounded. You are not trying to overwhelm someone with words. You are guiding them with understanding. Clarity also creates boundaries in communication. It helps you recognize what needs to be said and what does not. Not every detail is necessary. Not every thought needs to be shared. When your mind is organized, you naturally eliminate excess. You focus only on what moves the conversation forward, and you let go of what does not serve a purpose. In environments where clarity is absent, communication becomes chaotic. People talk more, meetings become longer, and decisions take more time. But when clarity is present, everything becomes streamlined. Fewer words, faster decisions, stronger outcomes. This is why clarity is not just a communication skill. It is a strategic advantage. Clarity reduces unnecessary communication because it replaces quantity with quality. It transforms speech from a tool of expression into a tool of precision. Instead of using many words to search for meaning, you use the right words to deliver it. And in that shift, your communication becomes more powerful, more respected, and far more effective. Listening multiplies understanding because it shifts your focus from expression to absorption. Most people listen with the intention to reply, not to comprehend. Their mind is already preparing an answer while the other person is still speaking. In that state, they are not truly receiving information. They are filtering it through their own assumptions. That limits understanding. True listening is different. It requires stillness, attention, and the willingness to set aside your own voice temporarily. When you do that, you begin to notice more than just words. You pick up tone, intention, emotion, and meaning beneath the surface. What is said becomes only part of the message. How it is said and why it is said become equally important. That depth is what multiplies understanding. When you speak, you only express what you already know. But when you listen, you expose yourself to what you don't know. That is where growth happens. Every person carries a different perspective shaped by their experiences. And listening allows you to access those perspectives without having to live them yourself. In that way, listening expands your awareness far beyond your own limitations. There is also a strategic advantage in listening. The more information you gather, the better your responses become. Instead of reacting based on incomplete understanding, you respond with precision. You address the real issue, not just the surface conversation. This makes your words more effective because they are rooted in insight, not assumption. Listening also builds influence. People are naturally drawn to those who make them feel heard. When someone senses that you are genuinely paying attention, they become more open, more cooperative, and more receptive to your ideas. In contrast, when you dominate conversations, you may feel in control, but you often lose connection. And without connection, influence is limited. Another layer of listening is patience. Understanding takes time. It cannot be rushed or forced. When you interrupt or jump to conclusions, you cut off the process before it is complete. But when you allow space for others to fully express themselves, clarity emerges. Misunderstandings decrease and communication becomes more effective with fewer words. Listening also sharpens judgment. Instead of relying on quick impressions, you gather enough information to see patterns and context. This prevents errors that come from partial knowledge. Many problems are not caused by a lack of intelligence, but by a lack of attention. Listening corrects that by forcing you to slow down and observe before deciding. There is strength in silence while listening. It shows discipline and control. It demonstrates that you are not driven by the need to be heard at all times. That restraint adds weight to your presence, because when you finally speak, it is clear that your words are based on careful consideration, not impulse. Listening multiplies understanding because it turns communication into a two-way exchange of value rather than a one-sided display of expression. It allows you to gather, process, and respond with depth. Instead of adding more noise, you create clarity. Instead of reacting quickly, you respond wisely. And in that process, your understanding doesn't just increase, it compounds. Over-explaining weakens authority because it signals uncertainty where there should be confidence. When a message is clear and grounded, it does not need excessive reinforcement. It stands on its own. But the moment you begin to repeat, justify, and stretch your point beyond what is necessary, you shift from delivering a message to defending it. And defense often reveals doubt. Authority is not built through volume. It is built through conviction. When you trust what you are saying, you don't feel the need to surround it with layers of explanation. You state it and you allow it to land. Over-explaining, on the other hand, creates the impression that you are trying to convince rather than communicate. And when people sense that, they begin to question the strength of your position. Even if your point is valid, there is also a loss of clarity in over-explaining. The more you add, the more you dilute the core message. What could have been sharp and impactful becomes buried under unnecessary detail. The listener is forced to sift through excess information to find the point. And in many cases, the point loses its strength entirely. Precision commands attention. Excess weakens it. Over-explaining often comes from a desire for validation. It is the need to make sure everyone understands, agrees, or approves. But authority does not seek constant approval. It delivers direction. When you explain beyond what is required, you are no longer leading the conversation. You are negotiating your position within it. That shift reduces your influence because it places your confidence in the hands of others. Another dimension is control. Strong communicators control the pace and direction of their message. They know when to stop. They understand that silence after a statement is part of the communication. It gives space for the message to be processed. Over-explaining removes that space. It rushes to fill every gap, as if silence is a weakness, when in reality silence reinforces strength. There is also an element of trust. When you over-explain, you imply that your audience cannot grasp the idea without excessive detail. This can create disengagement. People respond better to concise, direct communication because it respects their ability to understand. When you trust your message and your audience, you don't feel the need to over-deliver words. Emotion plays a role as well. Over-explaining is often reactive. It happens when you feel challenged, misunderstood, or judged. In that state, you try to clarify everything at once, hoping to remove any possible doubt. But emotional communication lacks structure. It becomes scattered, repetitive, and less effective. Authority requires composure, the ability to remain steady and respond with intention rather than urgency. When you remove over-explaining, your communication becomes sharper. You say what is necessary and nothing more. This forces your words to carry weight because they are not surrounded by noise. It also positions you as someone who is certain, focused, and in control. Authority is not about saying everything. It is about saying enough. Enough to be understood. Enough to move the conversation forward. And then having the discipline to stop. Discipline in speech reflects discipline in life, because the way you control your words is a direct expression of how you control yourself. Speech is one of the fastest ways to reveal a person's inner state. If the mind is scattered, the words will be scattered. If the emotions are unstable, the speech will be reactive. But when there is discipline within, it shows up as restraint, clarity, and intention in communication. Most people think discipline is only about actions, waking up early, working hard, staying consistent. But discipline begins before action. It begins in thought, and it is revealed in speech. Your words are the bridge between what you think and what you do. If that bridge is uncontrolled, then your actions will eventually reflect that same lack of control. When you speak without thinking, you are demonstrating impulsiveness. You are allowing immediate feelings or passing thoughts to dictate your expression. That same impulsiveness does not stay limited to speech. It spreads into decisions, habits, and behavior. A person who cannot control what they say will struggle to control what they do. But a person who can pause, think, and choose their words carefully is practicing the same skill required to make disciplined decisions in every area of life. There is also a structure to disciplined speech. It is not random or excessive. It is measured. It focuses on what is necessary and avoids what is wasteful. This mirrors a disciplined life where time, energy, and effort are directed toward meaningful outcomes rather than scattered across distractions. Just as disciplined individuals manage their schedules with intention, they manage their words with the same awareness. Discipline in speech also requires emotional control. Many words are spoken not because they are needed, but because they are felt. Anger, excitement, frustration, and insecurity often push people to speak prematurely or excessively. But disciplined individuals do not allow emotions to control their expression. They acknowledge what they feel, but they do not let it dictate what they say. This ability to separate feeling from response is a core element of self-mastery. Another aspect is consistency. A disciplined person speaks in alignment with their values and intentions. They do not contradict themselves frequently or speak carelessly in one moment and strategically in another. Their communication is stable because it is guided by internal standards, not external pressure. This consistency builds trust because people know that what they hear is reliable and intentional. There is also efficiency in disciplined speech. It respects time, both yours and others. When you are disciplined, you do not waste words on unnecessary explanations, gossip, or distractions. You communicate what matters and move forward. This efficiency reflects a life that is focused and purposeful, where energy is not wasted on things that do not contribute to progress. Silence becomes part of that discipline. Knowing when not to speak is just as important as knowing when to speak. It shows that you are not controlled by the need to fill every moment with sound. Instead, you are comfortable with stillness, and you use it as a tool to think, observe, and refine your response. That level of control is not accidental. It is practiced. Disciplined speech is a visible sign of an ordered life. It shows that you are not operating on impulse, but on intention. It reveals that you have control over your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And when that control is consistent, it creates a foundation for strength, clarity, and effectiveness in everything you do. Timing matters more than volume because impact is not determined by how much you say, but by when you say it. Many people believe that speaking more increases their influence, but influence is not built through constant expression. It is built through precise moments of expression. The right words at the wrong time lose their power, while even a few words at the right time can shift an entire situation. When you ignore timing, you create resistance. You may be correct, but your message will not be received because the moment is not aligned. People are not only listening to your words, they are responding to the context, the environment, and their own state of mind. If those factors are not right, no amount of talking will force understanding. In fact, the more you push, the less effective you become. Volume often comes from urgency, the feeling that if you say more, you will be understood. But urgency can lead to misalignment. It causes you to speak before the situation is ready, before the listener is receptive, or before your own thoughts are fully formed. Timing, on the other hand, requires patience. It requires awareness of when to step in and when to hold back. There is strength in waiting. When you observe first and speak later, you position yourself to respond instead of react. You gather information, read the environment, and identify the moment when your words will have the greatest effect. This is not hesitation. It is strategy. It is understanding that influence is not about constant presence, but about meaningful presence. Timing also creates emphasis. When you do not speak all the time, your words stand out when you finally do. People notice the shift. They recognize that something important is being said because you are not in the habit of filling every space with sound. That contrast between silence and speech amplifies your message far more than volume ever could. Another aspect of timing is restraint. Not every moment requires your input. Some situations need space to unfold. Some conversations need to develop without interruption. When you insert yourself too quickly or too often, you disrupt that process. But when you allow things to evolve and choose your moment carefully, your contribution becomes more valuable because it fits the need of the moment. Timing is also connected to emotional control. When emotions are high, the desire to speak immediately is strong, but those are often the worst moments to communicate. Words spoken in reaction are rarely aligned with intention. When you delay your response, even briefly, you give yourself the opportunity to regain clarity. That pause can be the difference between creating conflict and creating understanding. In leadership, timing is critical. A well-timed statement can inspire, correct, or redirect with minimal effort. The same message delivered at the wrong time can be ignored or resisted. This is why effective communicators are not just aware of what to say, but when to say it. They understand that communication is not only about content, it is about context. Timing matters more than volume because it determines whether your words land or disappear. Speaking more does not guarantee influence. Speaking at the right moment does. When you master timing, you no longer rely on repetition or excess. You rely on precision. And precision is what turns words into impact. Not every thought deserves expression because not every thought is refined, necessary, or aligned with purpose. The mind produces ideas constantly, some useful, many impulsive, and others shaped by emotion or temporary reaction. If you treat every thought as something that must be spoken, you turn your communication into a stream of raw, unfiltered output. That lack of filtration weakens both your message and your presence. There is a difference between thinking and deciding what is worth saying. Thought is automatic. Expression should be intentional. Discipline begins when you create a gap between the two. In that gap, you evaluate, is this useful? Is it necessary? Does it add value to the situation? If the answer is no, then silence becomes the stronger choice. Many thoughts are situational. They arise from mood, frustration, excitement, or insecurity. If you express them immediately, you risk saying something that does not represent your true position. Words once spoken cannot be taken back easily. They shape how others perceive you, and they can create consequences that outlast the moment in which they were formed. By filtering your thoughts, you protect your integrity and maintain consistency in how you communicate. There is also the issue of relevance. Just because something comes to mind does not mean it contributes to the conversation. When people express every thought, they dilute the focus of communication. The message becomes scattered, and the listener is forced to navigate unnecessary information. Selective expression keeps communication sharp. It ensures that what is said moves the interaction forward rather than distracting from it. Restraint is a form of intelligence. It shows that you are not controlled by every idea that appears in your mind. Instead, you are capable of choosing what deserves attention and what does not. This ability reflects control, and control is closely tied to authority. People trust and respect those who speak with intention, not those who speak impulsively. Silence plays a critical role in this process. It gives your thoughts time to settle. What feels important in the moment may lose its significance after a brief pause. That pause allows you to distinguish between what is temporary and what is meaningful. Over time, this habit strengthens your thinking because you begin to prioritize depth over immediacy. Another dimension is emotional clarity. Many unnecessary words are driven by the need to react, defend, correct, or prove something quickly. But reacting to every thought creates instability in communication. It makes you predictable and easy to provoke. When you choose not to express every reaction, you maintain control over your responses. You decide what deserves your voice instead of giving your voice to everything. Selective expression also increases the value of what you do say. When people recognize that you do not speak casually or excessively, they listen more carefully. Your words carry weight because they are not frequent or random. Each statement feels considered, and that consideration builds credibility. Not every thought deserves expression because expression is not about releasing everything in your mind. It is about delivering what matters. When you filter your thoughts, you refine your communication. You replace impulse with intention, noise with clarity, and excess with precision. And in that refinement, your words become stronger, more effective, and far more respected. Presence is stronger than noise because real influence does not come from how much you say, but from the weight of who you are in the moment. Noise tries to force attention. Presence naturally commands it. When someone relies on constant talking, explaining, and reacting, they are trying to fill space in order to feel significant. But significance is not created through volume. It is revealed through control, composure, and awareness. Presence begins with stillness. It is the ability to enter a space without the need to immediately prove yourself. When you are grounded, you do not rush to speak. You observe, You absorb, you allow the environment to settle before you contribute. That restraint creates a subtle authority because it shows that you are not driven by the need for validation. You are comfortable without attention, and that comfort makes people notice you more. Noise, on the other hand, often comes from insecurity. It is an attempt to be seen, heard, or acknowledged through constant output. But the more noise there is, the less value it holds. People become desensitized to it. It blends into the background. Presence does the opposite. It creates contrast. When you are not always speaking, your silence becomes noticeable, and your words, when they come, carry more weight. There is also a focus that comes with presence. When you are fully engaged in the moment, your attention is not divided. You are not thinking about what to say next while someone else is speaking. You are not distracted by the need to respond immediately. This level of attention sharpens your understanding and improves the quality of your responses. You are not adding to the noise. You are contributing clarity. Presence also communicates confidence without effort. You do not need to assert yourself repeatedly because your demeanor already reflects stability. Your body language, your timing, and your measured speech all signal that you are in control. People trust that kind of energy more than loud, constant expression because it feels grounded rather than forced. Another aspect is emotional control. Presence requires you to remain steady regardless of what is happening around you. Noise reacts. Presence responds. When situations become tense or chaotic, those who rely on noise tend to escalate the situation by speaking more, faster, and louder. But someone with presence slows everything down. They choose their words carefully, or they choose silence until the right moment. That control shifts the dynamic of the entire environment. Presence also creates space for others. It allows conversations to breathe. When you are not dominating the interaction, others feel more comfortable expressing themselves. This builds stronger connections and deeper understanding. Ironically, by saying less, you often gain more influence because people feel heard and respected in your presence. Over time, presence builds a reputation. People begin to associate you with clarity, control, and intention. They know that when you engage, it is meaningful. You are not just another voice adding to the background. You are someone who shifts the direction of the conversation. Presence is stronger than noise because it is rooted in substance, not effort. Noise tries to create importance through quantity, but presence reveals importance through quality. When you master presence, you no longer need to compete for attention. Your silence, your focus, and your intentional words do the work for you. Results speak louder than explanations because outcomes carry a certainty that words can never match. Explanations are attempts to describe intent, effort, and possibility, but results are proof. When results are present, words become unnecessary. When results are absent, words become irrelevant. Many people spend too much time explaining what they are going to do, why they are doing it, and how they plan to achieve it. But explanation is not transformation. You can describe discipline without being disciplined. You can talk about success without producing success. You can outline plans in great detail while still remaining in the same position. Explanations create the illusion of progress, but they are not progress themselves. Results eliminate doubt. They do not require persuasion. When something is visible, consistent, and effective, it stands on its own. No defense is needed. No justification is required. A result answers questions before they are even asked. That is why it carries authority. Because it is self-evident, explanations depend on belief. Results create belief. When you rely on explanation, you are asking others to trust your words. When you rely on results, you are giving them something they cannot deny. One is fragile because it depends on perception. The other is strong because it is grounded in reality. There is also a difference in energy. Explanations often drain time and attention. They require repeated clarification, especially when people are skeptical or unconvinced. Results, however, simplify everything. They reduce conversation. They remove arguments. They settle uncertainty without effort. What takes hours of explaining can be resolved instantly through evidence. Another important dimension is credibility. When someone consistently produces results, their words become more valuable. Even a short statement carries weight because their history supports it. But when someone relies heavily on explanations without outcomes, their credibility weakens over time. People stop listening not because they are uninformed, but because they have seen no proof behind the words. Results also create authority without noise. You do not need to constantly announce your progress when it is visible. You do not need to convince people of your direction when your output already shows it. This is where real influence begins, not in how well you speak about what you will do, but in what you have already done. There is a discipline required to prioritize results over explanations. It means resisting the urge to talk about progress before it is complete. It means allowing actions to mature in silence before presenting them to the world. This discipline protects your focus and prevents premature validation from replacing real achievement. Explanations often come from impatience. There is a desire to be recognized early, to be understood before the work is finished. But premature recognition can weaken execution. It shifts attention from doing to describing. When that happens, effort is divided and results suffer. Results speak louder than explanations because they remove ambiguity. They do not argue, they do not persuade, and they do not depend on interpretation. They simply exist. And in their existence, they communicate everything that words were trying to say. Life does not measure you by what you explained, defended, or promised. It measures you by what you produced. Words may open conversations, but results close arguments. Every explanation eventually fades, but outcomes remain visible, undeniable, and permanent. So the question is not how well you can speak about your intentions, but how consistently you can turn those intentions into reality. Because at the highest level, silence in planning and excellence in execution will always outweigh noise in communication. Let your life become the answer. Let your actions remove the need for justification. And when people look at what you've built, they should no longer need your explanation to understand your value, because in the end, true power is not in what you say. It is in what you can prove without saying anything at all.